Hi, and welcome back to Psychology with me, Mr. Snyder. And today we're going to end our discussion of personality with how we assess different personalities. So our learning objective today, just one learning target, is going to be to describe different personality assessment techniques and go over their reliability and validity as well. So different perspectives and several assessment techniques are used for personality, and it's pretty much you cannot just go with one personality test and then that's it. That's what you base their personality off of. There's a preference in the psychology community for an eclectic view of personality assessment, and this is choosing different parts and theories of classifying and identifying personality that fits a particular situation, rather than just always using one theory all the time. They all differ in the purpose for which they're conducted, and so they should be used differently as they go along to assess different aspects of personality. Here are some different methods and most likely who they're used by. I'll let you look at this, maybe screenshot it. There's another one. The trait theorists and the different personality inventories, there are a lot, so there are the other ones. You're not going to have to know every single one, but trait theorists, there are a lot of personality inventories that they use. So the different tools that we can use to assess personality are interviews, behavioral assessments, personality inventories, and projective tests. And we're going to be talking about what each one of these are and the different pros and cons associated with each. So interviews, you all know what an interview is. The therapist asks questions. It's kind of an unstructured format where it maintains communication flow between both, and the person's response might set up the interviewer's next questions. Clients must report on their innermost feelings, urges, and they have to be very, very open with the therapist. So a behaviorist is one to assume that the personality is a learned response from some sort of stimuli in the environment, and if there's an issue, then it's probably being caused by some sort of issue in the environment. The preferred method of a behaviorist assessment would be to watch the behavior unfold in the real world, and we would call that direct observation, which would be an assessment in which the professional observes the client engaged in their day-to-day behavior, where we can figure out what's wrong. So if a child is throwing temper tantrums at daycare, we can then look and see, well, if they're only throwing temper tantrums when they're being asked to do some sort of fine motor activity, then maybe they're throwing a temper tantrum because they are having trouble with that activity and they don't want to do it. Personality inventories are these standardized tests that consist of statements that require a specific standardized response. So it's very objective and it's very reliable. There's no open-ended answers. The response format is either yes, no, true, false, can't decide, etc. And let's talk about a couple of them. There's the revised neuroticism, extroversion, openness personality inventory, or the NEOPIR, and there's an NEOPI3 that is the newer version that can also be used with adolescents, and it's easier to read. And this one is based on the 5-factor model, so that's what you should know about the NEOPIR and the NEOPI3. The MBTI is by far one of the most popular because it's based on the ideas of Carl Jung, and it looks at 4 different personality dimensions. So it looks at your personality on a sensing intuition dimension, or an SN. People who use their senses, they rely on only what they can see, hear, and so on. They don't like to read into situations. People who are intuitive like to look for patterns and trust their hunches. Sensing people are also very detail-oriented, known to only work with the known facts that we have, and intuitive people like to use metaphors, analogies, and look for possibilities beyond what is there. Thinking and feeling is those who prefer to use logic, analysis, and facts. Those are thinkers. Those who use and make decisions based on their personal values and emotional reactions are feelers. Introversion, extroversion, basically, do you like to be around people? Is that where you gain your energy from, or do you gain your energy from being alone and doing individual activities and relaxing? This is somewhere along that line you fall. And perceiving and judging is, are you willing to adapt and modify your decisions and be spontaneous? That's a perceiver. Also, are you perceivers are curious and they tend to put off making a final decision so that they can cover all their possibilities. And those who are judgers are very action-oriented, scheduled, or organized, get the task over with and don't look back types. Another personality inventory, by far the most popular, is the MMPI-2, or the Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory. This one, what you need to know is that it is designed to detect abnormal behavior and thinking patterns in personality. So we use this to identify disorders. It has 10 clinical scales and 8 validity scales, in addition to the subscales of all of them. It's a very, very long test. And validity scales, what they are is that basically it's made to know that the person is lying or not, or are they being honest in their responses. You can do this by having the same question worded more than one way. You can basically have the question more than once, see if the person notices, and there's different ways to tell if they are telling the truth or not, and we call those validity scales. Interviews, how do we evaluate these? What's wrong with it? Well, the client can lie, misremember, distort the truth. Whatever it is, you're not getting the right information. Interviewers can be biased themselves by something called the halo effect. And the halo effect is forming an initial impression, whether it be favorable or unfavorable, based on their first meeting. All of the comments and behaviors at this first meeting will be interpreted to agree with this impression positively or negatively. So this stresses the importance of a good first impression with somebody, because that impression will live on with whoever the impression is with. Disadvantages of behavioral assessments, while it seems pretty accurate, there's the observer effect and the observer bias. Observer effect is a person's behavior is going to change if they know they are being watched. So you're not actually viewing their behavior as if it were them not being watched. And then observer bias is looking for what you want to see. It's kind of a confirmation bias, but the observer bias is you're looking for what you see, and that can be solved by having multiple observers and correlating their observations with one another. And the personality inventories are standardized. They are often scored on a computer. They are very reliable and valid. They're objective in nature as opposed to subjective. And there's no scope for any observer bias or bias of interpretation of these, since it is a standardized test. Now we get to projective tests, and these are the person that they're being given to are projecting their perception onto the test itself. So these tests present ambiguous visual stimuli and ask the client to respond with what comes to mind. We're going to talk about two. The first one is the Rorschach Inkblot test, and I'm sure you've heard of this in popular culture. There are 10 inkblots as ambiguous stimuli, and it's developed in 1921 by Swiss psychiatrist Hermann Rorschach. So here is a Rorschach inkblot example. It's just a blot of ink. Basically, the person being tested will tell the interviewer to show them what they see, and they have norms for these tests. There's popular examples for each one. But if I were to look at this and say I see a demon, or I see death or murder, it could expose some sort of problem in my unconscious, like I'm focused on death, or I think death is coming, something like that. And then finally, there's the Thematic Apperception test, or the TAT. It uses 20 pictures of people in ambiguous situations. as the visual stimuli. So here's an example of a TAT. It's a guy holding a rope. You're supposed to make up a story about this picture. So why is the person holding the rope? Who is he? What is he doing? Etc. And whatever the person then talks about could be what's on their mind, what's bothering them, and that would be where the session goes from there. So that is all I have on personality for you. Be sure to fill out the learning targets. Apparently it's not. How do we evaluate projective tests? They're not very reliable. They're not accurate. They're not valid. They're very subjective. So they're not used a lot anymore, but it is worth to take a look at. That's all I have for you. Have a good rest of the day. I'll see you back in class. Bye-bye.